One empire, 3 continents, 5 million square kilometers of land, all answering to a single city. No internet, no phones, no satellites, just roads, soldiers, and sheer will. For over 1,000 years, this was the most powerful civilization human beings had ever built, and it all started smaller than you'd ever imagine. This is what's left: stone, silence, and mist. But 2,000 years ago, this place roared with 50,000 voices at once. Empires don't just disappear overnight, they leave fingerprints. And today, we're going to trace those fingerprints all the way back to the beginning and all the way to the end. Because every great empire ends the same way it begins, with fire. Whether it's the fire of ambition or the fire of collapse, Rome saw both. And by the time we're done tonight, you'll understand exactly how the greatest power on earth went from untouchable to unrecognizable. Legend says it started with 2 brothers, abandoned by a river and raised by a wild wolf. Sounds like a myth, right? It probably was. But the Romans believed it, and that belief mattered, because a civilization built on the idea that it was destined for greatness usually finds a way to make that happen. Those 2 brothers, Romulus and Remus, grew up to found a city together, except they couldn't agree on where to build it. The argument turned violent, and in the end, only one brother walked away. Rome's very first chapter was written in blood, a pattern that, honestly, never really stopped. For 250 years, Rome was ruled by kings. Then the people had enough. In 509 BC, they threw their king out of the city for good. In his place, they built something radical for the ancient world: a republic. Power shared, power elected, power that, in theory, belonged to the people. Rome's biggest rival wasn't a king, it was a general named Hannibal. He did something no one thought was possible. He marched war elephants straight over the Alps to attack Rome from behind. It was audacious, it was terrifying, and for a moment, it nearly worked. Rome fought Carthage 3 times, across land and sea, for over 100 years. Fleets of warships collided across the Mediterranean, oars snapping, fire raining down. By the time the dust settled, Carthage was gone, erased, and Rome controlled every shore the Mediterranean touched. This is what made Rome unstoppable: not just numbers, but discipline. Legions marched in perfect formation, trained like machines, engineered for war. City after city fell, not because Rome had more soldiers, but because Rome's soldiers simply didn't break. That discipline built an empire, but it came at a cost. While generals brought home glory, ordinary soldiers came home to nothing. Their farms had been swallowed up by wealthy families while they were away fighting. A massive gap opened between the rich and everyone else. And in Rome, just like anywhere else, that kind of gap doesn't stay quiet forever. By the 1st century BC, Rome was tearing itself apart. Then, one general made a decision that changed everything. He led his army across a river he was forbidden to cross, a direct declaration of war on his own government. There was no turning back now. The Republic's days were numbered. Julius Caesar became the most powerful man Rome had ever seen. Too powerful, some thought. On the Senate floor, a group of his own colleagues surrounded him and stabbed him to death, believing they were saving the Republic. They weren't. They were about to hand Rome its first emperor. Out of the chaos rose Caesar's adopted son, a calm, calculating young man named Octavian. He outmaneuvered every rival, took the name Augustus, and in 27 BC became Rome's very first emperor. The republic that Romans had fought and died to create for 500 years was over. What came next is still studied today. 200 years of relative peace. Historians call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Engineers built aqueducts that carried fresh water for miles across mountains and deserts, into cities where some Roman citizens actually had running water in their homes. 2,000 years ago. Walk through a Roman city at its peak, and you'd find something surprisingly familiar. Markets, trade, public baths, courts of law, roads so well built that some of them are still standing today. This wasn't a primitive ancient world, this was, in many ways, the first real superpower. And nothing captured Rome's power quite like the Colosseum. 50,000 spectators, gladiators fighting for their lives, emperors watching from marble boxes above the crowd. It was entertainment. It was propaganda. It was a message to the entire empire. Rome is invincible. Rome is eternal. For now, at least. Under an emperor named Trajan, Rome reached its absolute peak, stretching from the hills of Britain all the way to the deserts of modern-day Iraq. This was the largest the empire would ever be. This was the top of the mountain. And from the top of any mountain, there's only one direction left to go. Rome's fall didn't happen overnight. It happened emperor by emperor. In one 50-year stretch, Rome burned through more than 20 rulers, most of them murdered by their own soldiers. The empire that once conquered the world couldn't even hold on to its own throne for more than a couple of years at a time. To pay for endless wars, Roman emperors started cutting corners literally. They shrank the amount of silver in every coin, over and over again. It was ancient inflation. Money that used to mean something started meaning almost nothing. And when people stop trusting the money, they start losing trust in everything else too. The empire had gotten too big for one man to run, so in 285 AD, Emperor Diocletian made a fateful call, split Rome in two, a western half, centered on the city of Rome itself, and an eastern half, centered on a newer, richer city, Constantinople. One half would thrive, the other would not. For centuries, Rome had crushed every enemy at its borders without much effort. Not anymore. Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Visigoths who used to fear Rome, started smelling weakness. And weakness, to an empire built entirely on strength, is the most dangerous thing there is. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Visigoth warriors broke through and sacked the city of Rome itself, a city that hadn't fallen to a foreign enemy in over 800 years. For 3 straight days, they looted it. The eternal city was no longer untouchable. The empire limped on for another 66 years, weaker with every passing decade. Then, in 476 AD, a Germanic general removed the last Western Roman emperor, a teenage boy, from power. There was no final battle, no dramatic last stand. Rome's story in the West simply ended. Ancient columns fading into modern government building. But here's the twist. Rome never really died. It's in your alphabet, your calendar, your legal system. The very idea of a republic with elected leaders and checks on power? That's Rome. Borrowed and rebuilt 2,000 years later. Empires fall, but the ideas inside them, sometimes those last forever.